So following from what Saskia said, she mentioned frames and metaphor theory and conceptual blending. Framing is very important to understand within the context of cognitive linguistics, because a frame is the underlying thing that you need to understand metaphors and blends. So Saskia will talk about blends just now in the context of conceptual blending theory and conceptual integration networks. And I'm going to talk a little bit about frames and how they relate to metaphors. So broadly speaking, a frame is just the general context within which something happens. So if you talk about a restaurant frame, you would just expect certain things. When you walk into a restaurant, you expect maybe nice music, you expect tables, chairs, you expect waitrons, you expect a manager to come and bug you every 15 minutes. Is the food okay? You expect to pay at the end, you expect the bill to come, you expect to pay a tip of 10%, you expect to order dessert after the main meal, and so on and so forth. You expect certain behavior. Your behavior is guided by the frame. So you don't go into a restaurant and sit on the floor. Or do you? I mean, if you're in Saudi Arabia or India, you actually have that option. You can go and sit on the floor if you want. And in some restaurants, you can only sit on the floor. Well, in South Africa, in most restaurants, you don't do that, but just shows that frames are culturally conditioned. Now, if a frame is defined as the general context within which things happen, a metaphor can be defined as a way of talking about certain things within that frame. All metaphors fit into a frame in that way. So if you imagine somebody sitting in a restaurant and you see somebody across eating very greedily, making a mess, messing his clothes, enjoying his food a lot, messing his mouth and so on, and you say to somebody, "Oh, that guy is such a pig." It's horribly judgmental, but in that context, we know that we're talking about food. We know we're talking about eating because the frame has primed that. So, we kind of get it. We understand what's happening. That brings me to the next point. Metaphors. What is a metaphor? Broadly speaking, a metaphor is an association between two unrelated domains. So, in a metaphor, we have what's called a source domain, and we have a target domain. The source domain is the thing we understand more about, the thing everyone has in common. The target is the thing we're trying to understand, the thing we're talking about. So often we talk about sex as heat. We talk about love as warmth. Love is the target domain we're trying to understand. Warmth is the source domain that we understand. So in our example, if we say that guy is a pig, the source domain is aspects about a pig, but things are very specific with regard to what goes into the source domain. Obviously, we're not talking about the pig's curly tail, we're not talking about it being pink, we're not talking about bacon, we're not talking about anything regarding that. We're talking solely about the fact that pigs are perceived to be maybe wanton, greedy, and so on. Now, a pig's general wanton, greedy behavior is being understood as mapped onto the way this guy is eating. So when we hear this guy's a pig, we just automatically map the wanton, greedy behavior of pigs onto the way this person is eating. It's unfortunate that pigs are so negatively perceived in our culture, because maybe not all cultures perceive pigs that way. Maybe in some rural farming area where pigs are a source of income and the farmer loves his pigs, that statement, "he is such a pig," might not have a negative connotation attached to it. There might be a culture where warmth has nothing to do with love, where warmth has got to do with annoyance, perspiring, and precluding you from doing work outside and so on. In our culture, we are primed that way. We are primed to come to see love as warmth. So that's basically how a metaphor works. But you know this from high school. So what makes conceptual metaphor theory different? Or how does it extend to what we normally, how does it extend or expand on what we know about metaphor already? Number one, it says that metaphor is conceptual. So when you hear a metaphor, what they're saying is that that is just a linguistic manifestation of an underlying mapping process that happens conceptually. So how does this all start? If this is the brain, pardon my drawing, and you think of the metaphor, love is warmth. If I say Saskia is such a warm person, you kind of know that I mean she's loving, she's maybe caring, she's friendly, outgoing, she's welcoming if you come to her office and so on. So our source domain, we have aspects of warmth and connotations of comfort and so on that go with that, being mapped onto someone's behavior. I won't write the whole thing. I hope you get the point. So how does that happen? Why does that happen? That happens because the association gets primed in the brain at a neural level. Imagine a 6-month-old baby being held by the mother close to her bosom. When that happens, an area of the brain gets activated. Say this bunch of neurons gets activated every time there's this tactile sensation of warmth. At the same time, you feel love somewhere in the limbic system, say. And every single time the mother holds that baby, the baby feels both warmth and love. And the brain, part of the brain that pauses or perceives warmth, lights up. Those neurons fire. And the part of the emotive center of the brain that feels that emotion also fires. So what happens eventually is that a link is drawn between these two. And then by the time this child is 4 or 5 years old, he starts to understand love in terms of warmth and warmth in terms of love. Why do we make warmth the source domain? It's because this is something physical. It's something more primary. It's something concrete. So the idea is that warmth is primary. Warmth is the source. This comes first. And then the feeling of love, which is more abstract, is something that gets associated later. Another example. We have this universal understanding of up being more. Why do we have that? Same thing. If I say the petrol price went up, if I say the temperature rose to 50 degrees, nothing goes up. God, many parts of the world is perceived to be up in the heavens. You going to hell, you point downstairs, or you point down. So you see evil, bad, negative as down, good, high prices and so on as up. Up is more, whatever more means. So where does that come from? The part of the brain that perceives amount, like there's books on this table. Every time you see those books piling up, there's a part of your brain that says, okay, there's this verticality associated with that. And there's a part of your brain that says, well, every time this verticality happens, there's an amount of books that are more. So you just start to prime that up is more. It's one explanation. But the idea overall is that metaphors are conceptual in nature. Metaphors have a neural basis. And metaphors are tied into a particular frame. So the frame is the overall scaffolding within which metaphors make sense. The moment you go out of that frame, the metaphor might not make as much sense anymore. So on that note, I hope that helps. Thank you.